The next item of business is a debate on COVID-19 Day of Reflection, an opportunity for us as a Parliament to reflect on the impact of the pandemic and its effect on communities across Scotland. And I call the First Minister.
President Officer, the annual Day of Reflection for COVID commemoration takes place this Sunday, the 9th of March. This year marks the 5th anniversary since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in Scotland and across the United Kingdom. This is a significant milestone, and I welcome the opportunity to gather in this chamber to remember all those who have been affected. The Day of Reflection offers a chance to come together to remember everyone who died during the pandemic. Losing a loved one is one of the greatest challenges many of us will experience, and we know all too well that those who experienced bereavement and grief during the pandemic faced unique challenges dealing with loss and grief at a distance. The Day of Reflection gives us an opportunity to remember the suffering endured during the pandemic, to remember the impact felt by all in our society, to remember the fear that we all experienced, and to remember the heroic actions of so many to support us all. The Day of Reflection has its origins in the recommendations of the UK Commission on COVID commemoration and also in the work of Marie Curie. I wish to put on record my thanks to both groups for all they have done to support bereaved families and to ensure that as a nation we continue to make time to remember those who lost their lives. Today, as First Minister, I express my deepest condolences to all those who lost family and friends, including those who are able to join us here in the chamber today. It is our solemn duty as leaders and as public servants to mark the Day of Reflection and to ensure that those who died are remembered by us all. In May 2022, it was my great privilege to attend the unveiling of Scotland's National COVID Memorial, the I Remember Walk in Glasgow's Pollok Park. I was struck at that event by the dignity and the strength of those who had suffered loss in such difficult circumstances. And on Sunday, I will attend a memorial in Glasgow to lay a wreath in memory of those who lost their lives. The commemoration is organised by COVID-19 Families Scotland, a group of bereaved families which was founded by Connie Macready during the pandemic. And I pay tribute to Connie, to Peter McMahon and to Carolyn Murdoch, who serve as the group's administrators, for all that they do on behalf of those families affected to ensure the legacy of their loved ones lives on. To support that legacy, in 2021 the Scottish Government funded the Remembering Together project, which commissioned creative practitioners and artists in all 32 local authority areas to co-create COVID-19 memorial projects. Remembering Together is about being part of a process to commemorate those who have lost their lives and those who have experienced loss and whose lives were changed forever. In closing, Presiding Officer, the annual Day of Reflection offers us all the opportunity to remember lives lost, to reflect on the sacrifice of many, and to provide space for people to consider their experiences of the pandemic in a way that suits them best. On Sunday, as always, we will remember.
Thank you. I now call on Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On behalf of my party, I begin by paying my deep respects to the many thousands of people in Scotland and many millions of people elsewhere who lost their lives to COVID. At moments like these, we reflect on how our world changed so rapidly and so dramatically in March 2020. At first, news reports warning of a mystery virus in China, then of it spreading to Italy. I still remember a sense of unease, even foreboding. And very quickly, the state passed legislation which required the population and all but essential workers to stay at home. Mixing with friends and family was mostly prohibited. Businesses were shut down, masks had to be worn, prisoners were set free, children were told not to come into the classroom. Necessary at first, but how effective they were and why did they continue for so long? These are questions for the ongoing public inquiries. In April 2020, while working as a journalist, I reported on a group of heroic care home workers in Forfar who spent 32 nights locked down with elderly residents in a bid to protect them. And later it emerged that elderly hospital patients who were known to be COVID positive were sent into Scottish care homes, where more than 4,000 residents died. And the Crown Office says these deaths are part of the single largest investigation of deaths in Scottish history, which is ongoing. All of this had and continues to have far-reaching consequences. The schooling and social lives of young people were curtailed, with ongoing consequences for learning, development and well-being. The NHS's pandemic focus meant that other treatments were suspended while waiting lists grew and grew, and many businesses fought for survival but failed through no fault of their own. And today, as we mark the 5th anniversary of the pandemic on Sunday, our thoughts are with all of those who lost loved ones. But I think we have now reached a stage where the Scottish Government can no longer deploy COVID as an excuse for all of their failings. And we have 2 inquiries attempting to answer serious questions on behalf of the public. Questions about why harsher lockdown measures were imposed in Scotland, and why ministers deleted messages which they knew would be needed by these inquiries, and why elderly people were knowingly sent into care homes after testing positive. So today we remember, but we can never forget. Thank you.
Thank you. And I now call on Anna Sarwar.
President Officer, 5 years ago, our country and our world were turned upside down. After weeks of rising warnings from across the globe, COVID-19 reached Scotland and the UK. And we all remember the anxiety and uncertainty of those early days. A country plunged into lockdown overnight, restrictions on daily life unseen in generations. Yet in the face of such upheaval, people came together. Sacrifices were made not out of obligation, but of care for family, friends and neighbours. It was a powerful reminder of our shared humanity and the kindness that defines our communities. But the human cost of the pandemic was profound. Lives were lost, families were separated, and communities faced unimaginable challenge. Amidst it all, the spirit of the nation shone through. People stepped up to support one another, looking after the vulnerable in their neighbourhoods. Businesses adapted to support their communities. And week after week, the public clapped to recognise the incredible dedication of NHS and care workers who put themselves in harm's way to protect others. And as we reflect on the past 5 years, we must acknowledge both the strength we showed and the lessons we must learn. The pandemic exposed vulnerabilities in our society and placed extraordinary pressure on our public services. Mistakes were made, and too often those on the front line did not get the support they needed. Today we remember not just the emotional and social toll of the pandemic, but also the challenges that remain. Those communities that were once thriving who are struggling to recover, or for too many families, the pain of losing loved ones without a proper goodbye remains raw. And perhaps most of all, the children who even today are still paying the price for lockdown, and who, if we do not act with urgency, will be left to bear the scars of 2 years of missed learning for a lifetime. So while we reflect today on the human cost of the pandemic, we cannot pretend it is just a memory. For too many Scots, young and old, the wounds remain unhealed. The pain remains fresh, and the support they were promised, in some cases, has not come. Before the last election, this entire Parliament committed to a national recovery, and I think we must all ask ourselves if we are living up to that promise. In remembering those we lost, we cannot forget our debt to those who live and who contributed so much. That is why, as we honour those we lost, we must also renew our commitment to those still in need today. Our reflections must be matched with action, so that we learn from the past and we build a stronger future. On behalf of the Scottish Labour Party, I commit myself to learning the lessons of the pandemic, restoring our public services, and ensuring we honour all those that lost their lives with meaningful action. And my thoughts and the prayers of myself and my entire party are with all those families who lost a loved one and all those impacted by the pandemic ahead of the day of reflection.
Thank you. I now call on Lorna Slater.
2025 marks 5 years since COVID-19 changed our lives, our communities and our world. In March of 2020, we didn't know what was ahead of us. We could see the rows of coffins in news footage from Italy. We knew something was happening, but we didn't know how profoundly it would affect our lives or how many friends and family members we would lose. Some people say we made it through the pandemic. We didn't, though, did we? We didn't all make it. And I am so sad for everyone that we lost. Each life taken was a beloved family member, friend, or colleague. Their absence leaves a void that words cannot fill, but their memories live on in our hearts. Today we reflect on the sacrifices required and the ever-changing impact the pandemic had on the nation and on people's daily lives. Many people still face debilitating symptoms with repercussions for their life and work. We pay tribute to the dedicated work of the health and social care staff and essential workers whose grit, valour and vital work saved lives and kept the country running. We will forever be in debt to the frontline workers who died during the pandemic. While we were all affected by COVID, as is always the case, peoples whose lives were already hard suffered even more. Disabled people, people on low incomes or who live in crowded housing, older people, and people with suppressed immune systems. No child or parent will forget the impact that the pandemic had on their schooling and family life, and no young person will forget how COVID hampered their start in adult life. Difficult times can bring out the best in us. We got to see what it looks like when we decide to house the homeless. We got to see who really is essential to our society and how much we take them for granted at all other times. We got extra space to walk in our towns and cities safely without cars, noise and pollution. We got to show that we care about our neighbours, checking in on them and wearing masks to keep one another safe. We got to see how transformative vaccines are in protecting us from lethal diseases. Everybody who lived through the pandemic will remember it their whole lives. People who are affected by long COVID, poor mental health, or who lost someone close to them will live with the pandemic their whole lives. Let us take the lessons of respect for essential workers, of helping our neighbours, of making sacrifices to help others, and let us use what we have learned to build a better future.
Thank you. I now call on Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, my earliest memory of the threat posed to our country by COVID-19 came in the form of images broadcast on the evening news of primary school children passing around each other a basketball covered in chalk dust so that they could learn about viral transmission. Within just a matter of days, we had gone from those cheerful and charming images to this government commissioning the NHS Louisa Jordan and to requisitioning private ice rinks to bolster mortuary capacity. I don't think anyone in this chamber or in wider public life will ever forget the enormous impact it had on all of our lives, an impact that reverberates still to this day. In some ways, it will always define part of us, just as it has defined our politics and our society in these past 5 years. Indeed, it has pulled on every thread that makes up the fabric of our communities, dominating our health system, impacting education and the economy. So many of our young people are still suffering under the long shadow of lockdown. That is borne out in the huge numbers still waiting for help with their mental health. Waiting times across our National Health Service haven't improved, and 168,000 Scots are still living with the debilitating effects of what COVID can become. Adults and children alike are fighting against long COVID every day. Many of Scotland's high streets are still empty compared to how they were before the pandemic, and all of us, on some level, are still recovering from the trauma of not being able to see or hug loved ones, of not being able to attend their funerals when they passed away, as so many thousands sadly did, of the disaster in our care homes. All of us hope that we will never have to live through an experience like the COVID pandemic ever again, but we in this place need to deal with events as we find them, rather than as we would just wish them to be. As such, we must be guided by the lessons of the last pandemic when it comes to dealing with the next. There is a lot that can be said about our response to COVID, for better and for worse, about the decisions that were made, the transparency of that decision-making, and the way in which rules were made and followed. But that is not for now. Today, we remember the many people who have died and the many who fought to keep them alive, our key workers and our health and care workers. Today, we remember all of those still living with its cruel impact. We wish comfort to those grieving and to those who still live and toil under the shadow of the pandemic.
Thank you. That concludes the debate on COVID-19 Day of Reflection, and there'll be a brief pause before we move on to the next item of business.